Dominique Toyer, and I don't know if you've noticed, but I have a very active toddler, so I'm a little tired. Earlier, I was giving a speech at Lithia, and today I wanted to also speak here. I don't know if time will permit. I honestly don't know how much time I do have to speak, but I would like to talk about a little bit of history from colonial times to present in terms of inhumane medical experimentation on African Americans. And I would also like to talk about toxic Christianity. Toxic. I really got to emphasize that, because there's a difference between being a good Christian and just being a toxic one. So I'd like to start the conversation off with a quote from a book called Medical Apartheid. And that is the book that was written, active toddler. It was written by an ethicist, and she documented the culture of colonial times, to the illegal experimentation on African Americans, both the incarcerated and our children. And I went to school here, so I know firsthand that none of what I'm about to tell you is in any history book you will find here in the Rogue Valley, or the United States for that matter. So this quote is from the book, Medical Apartheid. It says, "The Southern relationship was a slaveholder-physician dyad, with the slave left outside, unconsulted, uninformed, and with no recourse if she or he was unsatisfied, injured, or killed, a medical non-entity." I want to say this for any All Lives Matter person, any city council member, and of course any toxic Christian, everything that I'm about to say. So when I read this book, it talked about how it was prolonged, the racism in the medical field. So once upon a time, back when America was the good guys and we were Antifa because we were, fighting Nazis in World War II, what they discovered, what the Nazi doctors were doing, they thought that it was, inhumane, because it was. So they were experimenting on the Jewish, they were experimenting on twins, they were experimenting on prisoners of war. So, what did we do to make sure that this doesn't happen again? American doctors created the Nuremberg Code. What is the Nuremberg Code? It was instituted in August 1947 by American scientists to ensure that the horrors of abusive medical experimentation never again be visited upon the world. In fact, the first line is, "The consent of the subject is absolutely essential." Well, because the title of the book is Medical Apartheid from Colonial Times to Present, I think you can very much imagine that they ignored it. This is the conversation that I have with people that think that passing laws are going to work, because we live in a country where laws don't apply to some. That there are people that believe that they are above the law because, well, they've been getting away with it long enough, so it's natural for them to believe that. But now, the Black Lives Matter movement is the literal beacon for raging against the machine. So when asked their professional opinion on the Nuremberg Code. Has anyone ever heard of Yale Law School? Yale. They're supposed to be a prestigious institution. You want to send your kids there, but see, the prestigious schools here in this country have blood on their hands. Yale Law School ethicist Jay Katz, medical doctor, says that in the eyes of many, many American researchers, it was a good code for barbarians, but an unnecessary code for ordinary physicians. So Nazi doctors were barbarians, but here in America were ordinary doctors that experiment on children and inmates, mostly people of color. Now, I thought that when you become a doctor, you have an oath to first do no harm. So, but apparently that didn't apply to black people. So that's why we say Black Lives Matter, is because we want to be included in the conversation. So, in 1952, the American Medical Association House of Delegates accordingly issued a resolution entitled Disapproval of Participation in Scientific Experiments by Inmates of Penal Institutions. But the Nuremberg Code was established in 1947. So what that means is they didn't consider inmates people. That's what that means. Now, you might be asking yourself, what kind of experiments did they do on these inmates that would warrant to pass a law like this? Glad you asked. So, between January 1967 and April 1968, prime time for, civil rights, imprisoned subjects at the California medical facility were paralyzed with a little something called succinylcholine. And what that is it completely paralyzes your muscles. When 5 of the 64 selected prisoners refused to participate in the experiment, the institution's Special Treatment Board gave permission on behalf of the recalcitrant or the reluctant for them to be injected against their will. But I suppose that the Nuremberg Code only applies to barbarians, right? All right, so now let's skip ahead to something a little bit more recent, because it's people like Alan Broderick and people that believe in the All Lives Matter movement, but yet at the same time pose no resolution for systematic racism and refuse to acknowledge it. What I'm about to tell you is very painful, because what I'm about to tell you, they experimented on children between 1992 and 1997. And that's particularly scary for me because I was born in 1995. New York City's New York State Psychiatric Institute and Columbia University's Lowenstein Center for the Study and Prevention of Childhood Disruptive Behavior Disorders conducted several research studies that sought to establish a link between genetics and violence. Now, who wants to guess how many white children were involved in this experiment? None? Well, who deserves a prize? That person. So, they performed experiments upon at least 126 boys, most of whom were between the ages of 6 and 10, and they injected them with a little something called fenfluramine. In 1998, the author asked Timothy Walsh, a medical doctor, who headed the Institutional Review Board, why the protocol specified that the participants must be African American or Hispanic. And he said that it reflected the ethnic component of Columbia Medical Centers near the catchment area, which is legalese for, they rounded up people that lived within the area around the university, which is crap, because they gathered children from just black neighborhoods in Washington Heights, and then they went as far as Brooklyn. So that's kind of the problem there. But I wish I could talk more about this, and I'm sure there's a video out there of me giving this exact same information on Facebook somewhere, but I just want you to know that this is real. We are not safe. But I'm so glad that you're here, because this is a sign of unity, and you are educating yourselves. And the more you educate yourselves, you can spot the difference between those that do want to fight for human rights and those that just want to squander it. So thank you so much for believing that Black Lives Matter.